I had just finished a long, exhausting day at work and stopped at a restaurant hoping for nothing more than a quiet meal before heading home. I sat down, opened the menu, and raised my hand to ask for a glass of water. But the second the waitress walked toward my table, I stopped breathing. My entire body went cold. Standing right in front of me was my daughter-in-law, Emily. The same Emily my son had told the entire family disappeared months ago. But what terrified me even more was the fact that she was 8 months pregnant. Her hands were trembling. Tears rolled down her face. She leaned toward me and whispered words I never expected to hear. "Please, don't tell your son I'm alive." Then she revealed a horrifying secret about my own son. And in that moment, I realized I never truly knew the man I had raised. My name is Richard, and I'm 62 years old. For most of my life, I believed family was everything. I spent decades working overtime shifts, sacrificing vacations, skipping luxuries, all so my wife and son could have a better life than I ever had. My son Daniel was my greatest pride. He was intelligent, ambitious, and from the outside looked like the perfect son. I trusted him completely. Never once did I imagine he could become someone I wouldn't recognize. 3 years ago, Daniel married Emily. Emily was wonderful. She was polite, hard-working, kind-hearted, the kind of person who brought warmth into every room she entered. My wife absolutely adored her, and I was relieved knowing my son had chosen someone with good values. For a while, everything seemed perfect, or at least that's what I thought. Then 6 months ago, Daniel showed up at my house looking devastated. I had never seen him like that before. His eyes were red, his voice shaky. He sat down at the kitchen table and said words that changed everything. "Dad, Emily left." I remember staring at Fusion. He explained that Emily had packed some clothes, disappeared overnight, and left no explanation. He claimed she had abandoned the marriage and wanted nothing to do with him anymore. I asked if they had fought. He said no. I asked where she went. He said he didn't know. Something about the story felt strange, but he looked genuinely heartbroken, so I believed him. Weeks passed. I tried contacting Emily several times, but her phone number had been disconnected. Her social media accounts disappeared completely. It was like she had vanished from the earth. Daniel insisted she simply wanted a new life somewhere else. Eventually, I stopped asking questions. Life moved on, or so I thought. One evening after leaving work late, I decided to stop at a restaurant about 20 minutes from my office. It was a small place I'd never visited before. Nothing special, just somewhere quiet to eat before driving home. I walked inside, sat near the corner, and began looking over the menu. A few moments later, I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up casually, and everything inside me froze. It was Emily. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing, but it was definitely her, except she looked completely different than I remembered. Her face looked pale and exhausted. Dark circles sat beneath her eyes. Her expression wasn't normal. It looked terrified. Then I noticed her stomach. She was heavily pregnant, at least 8 months along. My chair nearly fell backward as I stood up. "Emily," I said loudly. The tray in her hand slipped. Instant glasses shattered across the floor. The entire restaurant turned silent. She stared at me with pure panic in her eyes. Before I could say another word, she rushed toward me, grabbed my arm tightly, and pulled me toward a small hallway beside the kitchen. "Certainly, since you've confirmed it's your own original work, here's a completely rewritten and expanded version in natural US English, maintaining the same core story while making the wording, dialogue, pacing, and emotional impact entirely fresh." Her chest rose and fell in quick, uneven breaths. Every inhale sounded strained, as though the air itself was too heavy to pull into her lungs. Her hands trembled so badly that she could barely keep them clasped together. She looked pale, exhausted, and terrified, like someone who had been carrying unbearable fear for far too long. I thought she might faint right there in front of me. Then she whispered something that completely froze me. "Please, don't tell Daniel you found me." For several seconds, I couldn't even respond. My mind struggled to understand what she had just said. "What do you mean?" I asked, staring at her. "Daniel told everyone you disappeared months ago. He acted like he had no idea where you were." The moment those words left my mouth, she completely broke down. Tears streamed down her face as uncontrollable sobs shook her entire body. This wasn't someone trying to manipulate. These were the tears of a woman who had been living in constant fear for months. months. When she finally managed to calm herself enough to speak, she began telling me a story I never imagined I would hear. She said everything had started almost a year before. At first, life with Daniel seemed perfectly ordinary. He still smiled, he still laughed, he still came home acting like everything was fine. She had absolutely no reason to suspect that anything was wrong. What she didn't know was that he had secretly developed a serious gambling addiction. He hid it carefully in the beginning. Small withdrawals from their accounts didn't seem unusual. Long evenings away from home came with believable excuses. Business meetings, overtime, helping friends. There was always another explanation ready. But addictions have a way of revealing themselves. Slowly, his personality began changing. He became impatient over the smallest things. Conversations turned into arguments. His temper grew shorter every week. He became suspicious for no reason, constantly accusing other people of judging him or trying to interfere in his life. Money vanished faster than either of them could explain. Bills that had always been paid on time suddenly piled up unopened. Credit card statements disappeared before she could read them. Savings they had spent years building seemed to shrink almost overnight. Whenever she asked where the money had gone, Daniel either changed the subject or exploded with anger. Eventually, she couldn't ignore the warning signs anymore. She searched through their financial records while he was away one afternoon. What she discovered left her speechless. Daniel hadn't simply lost a few $1,000s. He owed tens of thousands. The names connected to those loans weren't banks or financial institutions. They belonged to dangerous individuals who didn't operate within the law. The deeper she investigated, the more frightened she became. These weren't ordinary debts. These were obligations to people who expected payment, no matter the cost. When she confronted him that evening, hoping he would admit the truth and ask for help, his reaction terrified. Instead of apologizing, he flew into a rage. He screamed that she had invaded his privacy. He smashed a drinking glass against the kitchen wall. He accused her of betraying him. She had never seen him behave like that before. From that day forward, the man she thought she knew seemed to disappear. She felt like she was living with a complete stranger. Things became even more complicated when she discovered she was pregnant. She remembered sitting in the bathroom, staring at the positive pregnancy test with tears of happiness in her eyes. Despite everything happening between them, she believed this child might bring them back together. She imagined Daniel's smile. She imagined him becoming excited about becoming a father. She believed their growing family might finally give him a reason to change. Instead, the news pushed him even further into darkness. When she told him she was expecting, he didn't celebrate. He didn't hug her. He didn't even smile. His expression became cold. He said a baby would ruin everything. He claimed they couldn't afford another responsibility. Then he muttered something that haunted her ever since. "This isn't part of the plan." Those words echoed in her mind for days. What plan? She couldn't stop thinking about it. The answer came one evening completely by accident. Daniel believed she had already gone to bed. Unable to sleep, she walked quietly toward the kitchen for a glass of water. As she passed the garage, she heard his voice. He was speaking on the phone. She stopped without making a sound. At first, she only caught fragments of the conversation. Then she heard enough to understand. Daniel wasn't planning to repay anyone. He intended to erase the problem entirely. He had secretly arranged multiple life insurance policies connected to her. The debt collectors would get their money after he collected the insurance payout. Once everything was finished, he intended to disappear overseas under a different identity. Listening from the other side of that garage door, she realized the horrifying truth. She wasn't his wife anymore. She had become part of a financial strategy, a source of money, an obstacle to remove. She barely made it back upstairs before collapsing onto the bedroom floor. She didn't sleep for a single minute that night. The next morning, she confronted him. She demanded to know if what she had heard was true. For a moment, he looked shocked. Then all restraint vanished. He slammed her into the hallway wall with enough force to knock the breath from her body. His face twisted with anger, unlike anything she had ever witnessed. He leaned close enough that she could feel his breath and quietly promised that if she ever repeated what she had heard, nobody would ever find her. She believed him. That night, she waited until he finally fell asleep. Her heart pounded as she packed a small backpack. She grabbed only a handful of clothes, some cash she had secretly hid months earlier, and a few important documents. Without Without turning on a single light, she slipped out through the back door. She never looked back. One trusted friend helped her disappear before sunrise. Since then, she had never stayed in one place for very long. Every unfamiliar car made her nervous. Every unexpected phone call sent panic through her body. She constantly worried Daniel would eventually find her. The restaurant owner where I had found her knew only part of the story. He hired her under another name. He asked very few questions. He simply wanted to help someone who obviously needed a second chance. She worked quietly, saved every dollar she could, and waited for her baby to be born. As I listened, I leaned against the wall because my legs suddenly felt weak. I couldn't process what she had just revealed. Daniel, my son, the little boy whose bicycle I had taught him to ride, the child I had raised to believe honesty mattered, the young man I believed would always protect the people he loved. How had he become someone capable of sacrificing his own wife and unborn child simply to escape financial disaster? The answer made no sense. Yet everything Emily described fit together perfect. Then she reached out and grabbed my hand again. Her face became even more serious. "There is something else you need to know." I looked directly into her eyes. "What is it?" She lowered her voice until it was barely audible. "You're not safe either." A chill traveled through my entire body. "What do you mean?" "I heard him talking about you more than once," she whispered. "He knows exactly how much you've saved for retirement. He knows about your investments and your property. He said once I'm gone, you'll be next." For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Every memory I had of Daniel suddenly felt different. Every financial conversation, every question about my retirement, every offer to help organize paperwork, none of it seemed innocent anymore. I left the restaurant that night feeling like the ground beneath my feet had disappeared. The drive home passed in complete silence. One question repeated endlessly inside my mind. How long had my own son been planning this? The moment I walked into my house, I opened every cabinet containing financial records, bank statements, insurance documents, retirement accounts, property deeds. Everything looked ordinary at first. Then I noticed something that didn't belong. Hidden between old tax records was paperwork authorizing ownership changes connected to my property. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't. Someone had forged it. There was no doubt left. Daniel had already begun putting his plan into motion. Emily had just escaped. She had unknowingly saved my life. The following morning, I walked straight into the police station. I told investigators every detail I knew. Emily agreed to meet with detectives privately and describe everything she had experienced. The investigation moved much faster than anyone expected. Financial experts uncovered illegal transfers, forged documents, massive gambling losses, identity fraud, insurance manipulation. Evidence connected him to several criminal associates who specialized in financial scams. Within only a few days, police arrested Daniel while he was meeting individuals connected to the people he owed money. The list of charges kept growing. Fraud, forgery, identity theft, financial conspiracy. Investigators also continued examining evidence related to Emily's disappearance and the threats against her life. Everything he had spent months building collapsed almost overnight. Several months later, I visited Emily in a quiet apartment arranged through a witness protection program. She looked healthier, safer. For the first time since seeing her again, she smiled without fear. In her arms rested a healthy baby boy, my grandson. When she placed him in my arms, I felt emotions that words can barely describe. Joy mixed with heartbreak, hope mixed with regret. I looked into that tiny child's face and silently promised he would grow up surrounded by honesty instead of deception. That day, I finally accepted a painful truth. Sharing someone's blood does not guarantee they will protect you. Character matters more than family ties. Greed has the power to destroy compassion, loyalty, and even love itself. I walked into that restaurant expecting nothing more than an ordinary meal. Instead, I uncovered a nightmare hidden inside my own family. The son I thought I knew no longer existed. Perhaps he had disappeared long before I ever realized it. Some of life's greatest dangers don't come from strangers waiting in dark alleys. Sometimes they sit across from us at the dinner table, smiling as though everything is perfectly normal, while secretly planning our destruction. Losing Daniel to prison was painful, but losing the belief that I truly knew my own son was a wound that would never completely heal. From that experience, I carried one lesson for the rest of my life. The deepest betrayals are rarely committed by strangers. They come from the people we trust so complete that we never think to question their intentions until it's almost too late. If you'd like, I can also write Part 2, another 1,500 words, in the same emotional, suspenseful style.